glass a little bit, and you can see the thickness of the line actually begins to play a part. So we've had 7,000 years of very stable temperature by historic standards. I'll back up for a second, and you can see we've gone in and out of ice ages, and temperature has changed on the planet much more dramatically. So the planet that we know and love is a little bit of an anomaly by historic standards, and we're getting ready to leave that temperature range that much of civilization as we know it developed under, and we're going to see temperature go up. So Secretary Chu, who was here at Stanford, won a Nobel Prize. He's now works for the President as the Secretary of Energy. When he was back here visiting last year, said, for the first time in human history, science has shown that we're altering the destiny of our planet. It's quite alarming. It is alarming. So I started studying this topic about 4 years ago. I had never seen one of these. This is an extra strength antacid. I'd never had one before. This topic is really troubling. I now have days where when I read it bothers me so much I end up taking an antacid tablet. We have ourselves in a bit of pickle. So let's talk about California. So this is a map of the July temperatures in California. You see the Central Valley. Many of you have probably driven through it. It's flat, and it has farms and ranches pretty much as far as you can see. If you've driven on I-5 down to Los Angeles, or you've taken the freeway up to ski, you've driven through a part of it. This is the mid-century computer modeling of what the temperature will look like, and kind of two things jump out at you. The California deserts in the lower right-hand corner go up in temperature, and the agricultural regions of California go up in temperature. On average, about a 5-degree Fahrenheit increase in the agricultural regions of California. By the end of the century, the temperature in the agricultural regions of California goes up roughly 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a very significant impact on our state. Smaller snowpacks, the snow lasts longer, we'll have water shortages, and we'll have less water for agriculture. Okay, so most of you are probably not farmers. Most of you are from the Bay Area, so let's talk about the Bay Area. This is an aerial photograph of the Bay Area, and they false-colored in turquoise the areas that are likely to flood with 16 inches of sea rise. Now, 16 inches of sea rise, for most of you, is a certainty in your lifetime. It's on the way on the low end now of the range of what we're likely to see this century. So let's zoom in and take a look at some of the... So, Foster City. Okay, so Foster City, it's a very low-lying city, and it will be hit very hard, as will Redwood Shores, parts of East Menlo Park, and parts of East Palo Alto. Going further down in the bay, that little faint line that you see cutting across the bottom there is 101. Whole stretches of 101 here and in Marin County end up being very vulnerable to flooding. Parts of Moffett Field, both Google and Cisco headquarters are on land that either will be flooded or will be very close to land that will be flooded. Looking up at the North Bay, a lot of Vallejo is very low-lying. My old high school in Larkspur, California, the second-story classrooms will still be usable, but the playing fields and the parking lots and the like are all going to have problems with water. Corte Madera, San Rafael, parts of Richmond, all will be impacted by a rising ocean. So it's not just the West Coast. It's not just California. This is 1 meter, so 39 inches of ocean rise. That's more in the mid-range of what the computer models show for this century. Much of Florida, parts of Miami, St. Petersburg, Tampa. There are a lot of cities that are at risk, both in the U.S., Manhattan, and then cities around the world, Venice and Amsterdam. The city that is most likely in harm's way, where the whole city is, the big cities in America that's most vulnerable is New Orleans. We've seen that already. New Orleans is very low-lying. The city itself is sinking, and the ocean is rising. So, there are also some things that are very hard to know because they have tipping points or irreversible thresholds. This is a little bit like spinning an egg on a table and trying to predict after how many spins the egg is going to go out of control and exactly at what angle it's going to spin off the table and where it's going to hit. You know that if you spin an egg fast enough, eventually it's going to lurch out of your control, but predicting exactly when and exactly where is very, very hard. So ice sheets are difficult to model. They don't melt in a completely even pattern. And the ice sheets around the world have sped up, particularly in the West Antarctic ice shelf and in Greenland. They've been melting very unevenly. And exactly what's going to happen, scientists are struggling to model. But both Greenland has got 20, 22, 23 feet of ice. That is, we melted all of Greenland. The ocean would rise over 20 feet. The West Antarctic ice sheet has another 20 feet in it. So 16 inches is modest compared to the amount of ice that we have frozen around the world. Another area that you may have heard about or read about is ocean acidification. As you put CO2 into the atmosphere, a third of it or so ends up dissolving into the ocean and making it more acidic. As you make the ocean more acidic, the traditional life forms in the ocean struggle. Fish, the coral reef, many of the shellfish have real problems as the ocean acidifies. And it will warm, and that also stresses some of the systems. So Jim Hansen is at NASA. He's one of the world's leading climatologists. Summarized it this way: the climate is nearing tipping points, changes are beginning to appear, and there is a potential for explosive change, effects that would be irreversible. And to some extent it is these irreversible effects that we worry the most about. You cannot refreeze and remake a glacier. It takes hundreds of thousands of years to make a glacier, but you can melt one very, very quickly. You can burn coal and you can acidify the ocean. It's much trickier to figure out how you get all that acid out of the ocean. As Senator McCain said last year, common misperception is that this is a crisis down the road. Climate change is real and it's happening now. He said that after a tour of Alaska to observe himself what he had seen. Or, as our own governor has said, the time for action is now. So let's, you can see why you study this long enough and you end up taking some antacids. So let's take a look at some of the things that we can actually do to prevent a catastrophe. So, answers to the quiz. Okay, 6 items that families do that dominate the carbon footprint. So, the number 1 is air travel. If you fly a lot, it has a big carbon footprint. A rough rule of thumb is that one airline ticket has the same amount of emissions as a large SUV driven the same distance. So if 4 of you hop on a plane and go back to New York and fly back, that has roughly the same emissions as taking 4 Chevy Suburbans and driving them to New York and back. Roughly. If your parents go off to Hawaii for the weekend, that's roughly the same if you could drive to Hawaii as taking 2 pickup trucks and driving them all the way to Hawaii or to Europe or to Australia and then driving them back. So it's very easy with air travel. My daughter did this one year where she had 4 trips. And she goes, oh my goodness, nothing else I do matters because I've flown so many trips. So, and some of you will live in families where one or more of your family members, their air travel just dominates your family's impact on the environment. Others of you may live in families where you go through several years without doing much flying at all. Second item is the stuff you buy. Okay? A lot of it is manufactured in China. They use coal to manufacture it. It's put on a ship. The ship burns stuff. It's brought over here. It's trucked to a store, to an Amazon warehouse. You go, you pick it up. It has a plug. You plug it in, and then ultimately it has to go into a garbage stream and be disposed of. And it's interesting that when you add up all of the